Hello and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on the exciting topic of how to put storytelling at the heart of fundraising. My name is Liz and I'm your host for this session, and joining us as our guest speaker is my charity digital colleague Chris Hall, Head of Marketing. In a few minutes, we'll be covering the most important elements of storytelling, how you can develop a strong and lasting emotional connection, the elements to use to plot your storytelling, and how to demonstrate your successful impact, and lots more, I'm sure. Thank you to our audience for taking the time to join us today. It will definitely be worth your while. And before Chris pops on to introduce himself, I just want to go through a bit of housekeeping, a few things to mention here. Feel free to drop your questions on the topic in the Q&A and we'll answer these at the end. You can also vote for a question with a thumbs up. We do have closed captions available. And you can turn these on by clicking on the CC closed caption button. Use the chat function too to share with us your struggles and personal experiences and any advice and tips during the webinar. We all learn from each other and it's a great way to keep the webinar interactive as well. So in fact, if you just want to tell us where you are joining us from today, go ahead and stick it in the chat. We are recording this session, so don't worry about taking notes. The recording, together with the slides and resources, will be available on our website soon, and we'll let you know by email when these are ready. If we do have any connection issues, I'll jump in and my colleagues in the back end will sort these out for us. Without further ado, Chris, I'll move over to you. You're going to take us through the wonderful world of the art of storytelling. Hello, Chris. Welcome.
Hey, Liz.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be hosting with you again today.
Thanks very much. Pleasure is all mine, and that's what I'm hoping for. Hopefully, we can share some good little tidbits and information.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to switch my camera off and unmute myself, and I'll let you go ahead.
Champion. Thanks very much, Liz, for a lovely introduction as always. And hello, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're doing well. It's been a few months since I spoke to you all. But it is great to be back as ever, and I hope you're all excited as I am to join today's session. And as Liz said, of course, contribute as we go through. Please feel free to use the chat, talk to each other, share inspiration, share stories, share learnings, share experiences, as that's what these webinars are all about. So the more active you are on the chat, the more you'll get back, and that's the best part about it. That's most value. Before I get into it, I'd just like to start with a little bit of a reminder of who I am, for those of you who possibly haven't seen me deliver one of these before. I'll keep it brief, very quick, and then we'll dive into what we're all here to listen to today. So I'm Chris Hall. I'm Head of Marketing here at Charity Digital. I've been here for 3 years, and I oversee all things that come under our marketing plethora, essentially, from our content all the way through to our events, our overall platform growth, and everything in between. Bit of a jack of all trades, master of none, this type of what I've referred to. I've been working in marketing and digital, the sort of tech for good space, for getting on, it'll be 11 years now. I know it might say 10 years on there, but I think it's 11 since I last done one of these. But I've never feel quite as home or quite as rewarded as I have at Charity Digital. As you can see, I'm a proud Geordie, love where I come from, got black and white blood, although I do live down in the south now. Shameless Newcastle United fan, which wasn't as much of a bad thing as it used to be. I've managed to travel the world quite a bit, been to Antarctica on a climate change expedition, which was amazing. I'll tell you all about it over a pint, should you wish to. And if for those of you who's been joining me speak on these the last few times, I'm still a dad to be, still waiting dad to be. My partner is expecting our first child any minute now, so I spend my time reading loads of parenting books, packing hospital bags, in drilling holes in walls that I'm not very good at. Anyways, that's enough about me. Today I'm here to talk about how to put storytelling at the heart of your fundraising. To stand out and raise money online, we need to do 3 things as charities, essentially. Number 1, define our cause and define an audience to promote our mission to. 2, generate an emotional reaction between you and the audience. And 3, find a voice and find the content that connects your audience to a mission over and over again, not just once. And the best way to achieve all this is through storytelling. Now, storytelling is both an art and a science, which makes it really tricky. But that doesn't mean that you can't improve your processes as you go. Learn how to tell stories more effectively, use certain tricks to engage your audience, and utilize your users in the process to help tell better stories as well. In today's session, we're going to tackle the most important elements of storytelling, including how you can develop that emotional connection with your audience, how to use various mediums, how to demonstrate your impact, and a lot more on top of that as well. So without further ado, let's start where all good stories begin, at the beginning. And the beginning in this case is emotional connection. The most important part of any story is emotional connection. And this is where the science really comes into it. From a definition point of view, an emotional connection helps your audience sympathize with your mission. It supports greater donor retention and creates a sense of community across your network as well. It's something that's essential for all charities, especially when it comes to fundraising in particular. Donors want to see that their donation is having an impact, and feel that they've made a difference to something they care about. And that's simply what an emotional connection is in this sense of the word, an individual's passionate attachment to a cause and the individual's need to be involved in that cause as well. And defining an emotional connection is actually quite easy, but forging an emotional connection is something that's quite difficult. And that's why storytelling is such an essential component to bridging that gap. It can be an effective tool to bring you and your donors much closer together and increase that opportunity for repeat donation over and over again. So how do stories create emotional connection? Well, it's all to do with psychology, really. The human brain is naturally drawn to stories across millennia, across the world, across all industry and all walks of life. Stories have brought people together and continue to bring people together. Stories activate the emotional centers in our brain. They evoke strong and often visceral reactions, and they generate that all-important facet of emotional connection, which is empathy. Our reactions to stories are physical. They excite the neurons that release dopamine, which affects our emotions, movements, and the sensations of either pleasure and pain. Stories are also trigger the release of cortisol, which focuses the listener's attention. They release endorphins too, which acts as a sedative, to protect us from any discomfort we might feel. And more importantly, stories stimulate the creation of oxytocin, which is something I know all about at the minute. It's a hormone that enhances our feelings of trust, empathy, and generosity. The hormone basically tells us what we should care that we should care about someone or something that we should perhaps try to help. And more hormones are released depending on the success of that story as well. Empathy and storytelling have a long history together. Literature, for example, has long been cited as a route to improving our empathy. Indeed, sort of recent research in neuroscience confirms the fact that shown that engaging in literature drastically improves a reader's empathy. And further studies from the National Library of Medicine show that people who read often have better social cognition. In other words, they understand what people are thinking and feeling more. And in essence, recipients of stories can better put themselves in other people's shoes as well. Stories are universal. They create a physical reaction, they generate empathy, and allow us to identify with the plight of others. It's no wonder why they make such an effective fundraiser too, when you think of it like that. So how do we go about creating stories that create those strong emotional connections? Well, let's look at the very, very basics of storytelling. According to a study by Scientific American, 65% of our conversations are based on storytelling. We are telling lots and lots and lots of stories, but that doesn't necessarily mean our stories are told well. And to help that, we can ask ourselves, well, what constitutes a good story? And I think the best place to start is by mapping out the 5 essential elements of a story: characters, plot, setting, conflict, and resolution. And this storytelling roadmap really helps charities to think about the stories they might tell and how those stories might look on top of that as well. You don't need to cover every element of what I've just mentioned every time you do. Every time you go on to create a story or write a story or record a story. And most stories focus on more on some or less on the others of those 5 elements. But by keeping the different parts in mind, you give yourself a story that has a loose, what we call bendy structure to follow, and give it all the opportunity to flourish as well as it possibly can. So let's have a look at those 5 sort of things individually. First up is characters. The characters are the individuals that your story is about. These are likely to be your service users, your staff, your volunteers, or your donors. And these are the individuals that will carry your story forward, facing and overcoming challenges and showing the impact of your work. Good stories show characters in action, and they also tend to show character development in the story as well. The audience wants to see your character grow, change, fail, succeed. They want to humanize with them. And that likely means showing how they face these challenges, how they help your charity, and what progress they've made with you or to help you make progress. It's also important to think about perspective. That means thinking about which character is telling your story. Is the charity the narrator, or perhaps a member of staff? Or can a donor tell the story of how their donation is used, which we'll come to it a little bit more in a minute? There's so many possible options, all of which could make great stories. But always consider the emotional connection that characters that can create, tie it back to the original most important point, which is that character invoking the emotional connection that you really want to achieve? Next up is setting, and the setting can be anywhere. But it's likely that your stories occur where your charity is working the most. That might mean centering it around the office, looking at what staff are doing, or it could be out working in the field with your users, looking at how your charity is helping on the ground, or perhaps exploring the challenges that service users are facing in their environment. Some stories, particular written ones, do not need to be set in specific locations, but can allude to these various locations where the story might occur. So for example, if you're a conservationist charity, you might reference some of your early struggles, the absence of funding, and explain how you find your feet supporting conservation in various places in the UK or around the world even. Number 3 is the plot. Now, this is the events that occur during the story. That means taking a much wider view of your story as a whole. Telling great stories depended on establishing your history, understanding what happened in the past without dwelling on it, understanding what's happening now, and how that can push you into the future. The past and present can both work well to generate that emotional connection and the struggle and the story and the history and the powerful narrative of where you've been. Showing those struggles can capture your audience's attention, generate that sympathy and empathy, and allow them to identify with your cause in a way that's authentic. And the future is where potential donors can make the difference, putting the onus back on them to really invoke that emotional connection of empathy and how they want to help and how they can help your organization. You essentially want your audience to know that with a donation, they can dictate how your story ends. And always remember that fundraising is often the promise of a happy ending. So it's always good to play on that narrative strongly. Number 4 is conflict. Every great story has a conflict to solve. And the conflict for charities is your mission, essentially. Now, everything you do, all the work you've done is based around the conflict you want to resolve. So for example, charities supporting the homeless face the conflict of the lack of support for homeless people. Their mission is based on trying to resolve that conflict. So define the conflict, show some examples, then explain how you're aiming to overcome the challenges, and moreover, how your donors can help you do that. And following every good conflict is a resolution. And resolution is, in this case, the act of showcasing the amazing work you do, otherwise known as your impact. This means the work you're currently doing to solve the conflict. And importantly, the success stories you've already seen. Stories should show how lives have been improved, new paths have been forged, and brighter futures have been created. Then double down on that and show that with the support of your donors, how much further you can potentially go. Charities do such amazing work in their communities, and one of the biggest mistakes we make is failing to showcase that work effectively. And we face huge challenges as charities, but we also overcome these challenges, and it's a really good use of storytelling to show users what those happy endings are. Excuse me, just gonna have a little drink. So once you've considered all of that, you need to start to think about how to tell your story or the mediums involved. You can tell it in all manner of different mediums and at any length, as long as you follow these sort of basic guidelines of storytelling. So let's start by looking at length. So stories can be only a few words long, as with the famous example given on the screen there by Nobel Prize winning author Ernest Hemingway. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. In 6 words, Hemingway's story provokes a huge amount of empathy for the presumed parents, for the presumed child, and for everybody involved in that 6-word phrase, essentially. The length of your story depends on the scope of the story. You want the scope of the story you want to tell. If it's a short success story about how you've helped a service user, perhaps the story can be confined to a 600-word article with a call to action, raise funds, or a social post, or even a short video. If, however, you're telling the story of your charity from start to finish, all the good you've done over many years, then that might require an in-depth article, it's a 5,000 words, a 10-minute video, a recorded explanation embedded in an article, or even a series of different types of content. Finally, the length of your story will be dictated by the medium you choose. However, it should never be more important than the content itself. For me, I always, if you've joined a content webinar with me previously, you'll have heard me say this many a time. But for me, the length is much less important than actually focusing on the content that you're creating. And the example I always cite with this is that we, as human beings, are creatures of binge. Essentially, we engage with good content, and I'll ask for a sort of remote show of hands here for anyone who's watched 10 episodes of a Netflix show back to back, for anyone who's listened to 3 or 4 podcast episodes back to back, for anyone who's read more than 3 pages of a book in any sitting, for anyone who's attended a day event. I can go on and on and on and on. But essentially what I'm getting at is we engage with those pieces of content so much, so frequently, and over long periods of time because the content grips us. So length should never take over from content. Second most important thing is defining the audience. I think I've been forgetting to change slides here. Sorry. No, I'm good. There are also so many ways to deliver your story as well. You can write an article, record a podcast, host a webinar discussion, or film an in-depth video. You can think outside the box a little bit, create infographics or drawn comic books, perhaps even writing an entire pamphlet. You might want to keep it small by just producing a snippet or a short social media post, but to choose the best medium, think carefully about the message and the audience you want to target. Picking your medium based on your message is important because you need to ensure everything remains appropriate. Publishing a story on TikTok about the devastating impact of war, for example, could seem a little crude. So think carefully about your message and decide on the most appropriate medium to convey that message as well. Going back to what I just said about put the content first. Once you have the content, that'll help you define everything else. The next thing you really need to think about is your audience. Think about how different generations consume media and the target audience for the story you wish to tell. According to reports, for example, Gen Z consumes more online video than any other generation. So you may wish to target them with video content. They also really like video games, which suggests interactive elements of your stories might work well as well, along with sort of gaming for good and other fundraising ideas. In addition to that, according to a report that was done by Deloitte, 50% of Gen Z listed social media as their favorite source for news and content updates. That means that if they are your target audience, you should focus on stories in a medium that is shareable and social media friendly as well. Us millennials, we consume content through different media types. According to a college group report, millennials particularly like tuning into content while they do other tasks, such as working, studying, and doing chores. So podcasts, webinar, and oral histories may work very well for the millennials out there. You can simply embed a recording of a written article above the article, which will increase the reach of your story, allowing them to put that on in the background, easily allowing you to traverse various mediums without much effort as well. Gen X are slightly more complicated. According to a global study done by Global Web Index, Gen X spend at least 40 minutes more each week on social media compared to millennials, which seems surprising. Their overall social media activity was once confined to Facebook, but they do seem to be branching out in recent years towards YouTube, Instagram, and even TikTok. That means that videos are starting to prove appealing to Gen X as well as Gen Z. The previous insights are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to help you defining your audience, define your content, and define your mediums. And as we often do here at Charity Digital, we will always encourage you to do more research as well, keeping up to date with the latest demographic and consumption trends, as well as the latest digital and consumer trends. And always keeping them in mind when producing stories. Have a little check-in, see what's going on, see how things have changed, progressed, improved, essentially. So I've listed some useful websites, and I'll give you a little bit more of a backdrop about each. So we've got the Global Web Index, which I just mentioned, and GWI regularly publishes important research that helps us as organizations better understand our audiences. It provides deeper insights, supports digital decision making, and gives organizations access to quite a lot of data, actually. We Are Social are another one. So they have a digital report that's published in partnership with Hootsuite, to the social media publishing platform. That looks at a variety of themes and trends. It provides data digital from different countries, including data on the use of mobile devices and the consumption of social media, amongst other things. Ofcom Communications Market have their communications market report, which allows users to interrogate data from Ofcom, consumer research, and selected third parties covering digital usage, the mediums that are being used, connection speeds, and a lot more as well. Nielsen Digital Insights is another one that we use here, and they release reports regularly that highlight the behaviors and attitudes of consumers. The reports tackle individual subjects in detail, which would be particularly helpful if you're looking for more information on those specific digital trends as well. And of course, for the charity-specific trends relating to digital, check out some of our amazing friends, which include CAST, the Catalyst, the NCVO, among others. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention ourselves, the Charity Digital website. We carry lots and lots of information on how to create articles, videos, webinars, podcasts, and a lot more in those mediums as well. The key takeaway is sort of think carefully about the best medium to deliver your message, and think about the best medium to reach the audience that you want to reach. Then you can start to really delve into how to develop the actual story that you want to tell, using some of the essential devices of storytelling that we've just listed above. Oops, oh sorry, I've clicked off my screen here. Does that work? Yes. So the next point is how we can get your users to tell your story as well. Your users will likely be characters in your stories we talked about before, but they can also be narrators, dictating the story from their own perspective. We're talking about user-generated content, which has become a significant content trend in recent years, particularly during lockdown. The community fundraising element of donors creating content that you can share became a huge factor of lockdown fundraising. But let's dig a little bit deeper into it. User-generated content is original content created by users, customers and users, often published on social media or other popular channels. User-generated content can come in many forms, including images, videos, reviews, testimonials, and so on. It's a real easy way to tell the story of your mission. It allows you to center the user rather than the charity, with a level of authenticity and personality that can really boost that emotional connection. It's essentially donors talking to donors about why they should donate. Comes with a whole myriad of benefits. As mentioned previously, stories with users front and center tend to feel more authentic. According to Stackler survey, consumers tend to view user-generated content as 2.4 times more authentic than one compared with other content. That's particularly important in the charity sector, where authenticity and building trust is key, as authenticity engenders trust, which is important. Public trust in the charity sector has improved since the pandemic, according to government reports, but still overall it remains quite low. The mean trust in charities is about 6.4 out of 10. which is a massive improvement on 5.5 out of 10 that we saw in 2018, but still lower than the levels of trust from over a decade ago. The user-generated content acts as a trust signal, essentially, by allowing your viewers to skip all the pageantry, get right to the crux of what's happened. It's essentially that window into the lives of users, into the lives of donors, which helps the audience feel more involved and gives them an immediate sense of loyalty and involvement. The focus on authenticity and increased loyalty tends to also help donor retention. People who already donate to your charity will see the user-generated content and feel a sense of ownership. Feel their donations have already started to improve lives. And there's so many ways to create user-generated content. You can do almost anything, ranging from interviewing users on a podcast, creating a video following their stories, or just asking for a written guest blog on your website. All really strong options. But there's some forms of user-generated content that are broadly considered more popular, and we're just going to look into those right now and give a little advice on each creation of each type. So number one, take advantage of imagery. That might mean asking users to send in pictures and captions that tell the story of their lives, or even creating a hashtag that is dedicated to a particular cause. Perhaps the images will show the challenges users are facing with reference to how the charity might help. Alternatively, you could showcase the work of volunteers, asking them to submit photos that show some of the progress that they are making as well. You can use these photos to create a story. You may not even need to ask for content. Many users, volunteers, and staff will tag charities, which means all you need to do is reshare. Alternatively, you can search locations and hashtags on social and see if anything relevant and shareable pops. It always the ice bucket challenge always springs to mind as the first ever bit of user-generated content which was taken advantage of. And how long ago was that? 7-8 years ago, maybe, if not longer. But that always makes me think of that and how easy that was done with with minimal effort from the charity as well. Less to be said about all the ones that different types that followed them, but that was sort of a pioneer in the UGC world. 2 is conduct interviews. You can conduct interviews with your users, which you can publish in various forms. You can perhaps publish it as a podcast. You could simply transcribe the interview for readers, presenting it verbatim, or in the style of broadsheet interviews. You could also film the interview and present it as a video. Use snippets from the recording to post on social media to pique other people's interest and drive people back to the main video. All of the above options should center on the user, forming that emotional connection and getting that glimpse of their lives, essentially. Number 3 is video diaries. A video diary can come in many forms. It could be part of a longer video, it could be part of a series, it could have a written script that details the lives of users, shows why your mission is so valuable, and shows the impact of your work as well. These are quite typical videos for charities. It's often what we see, but they do often require a higher budget to make them seem more, to deliver, essentially. An alternative is a more authentic, low-budget version you can present. You can present something close to a day in the life, for example, of a user, showing some of the obstacles and challenges they face. Showing how your charity supports them, or perhaps a simple live stream would prove effective. The beauty of the technology that we all have these days is that we all have the capability to be a videographer. We all have the capability to record a podcast in the palm of our hand, or most of us do. So going for those, authentic social media sort of created handheld videos often has a different sense of authenticity to it. Especially if you're a smaller charity that doesn't have much budget, that relies so much on the generosity of your donors, they'll appreciate that sentiment. And it makes it feel more real, makes it feel more engaging to them, and might, and can often, increase the likelihood of donations from building that just sameness, essentially. The final and perhaps most well-known form of user-generated content is the social media takeover, which has become popular in recent years. Various charities have already taken part in social takeovers, including Scope, who handed over their Twitter account to Sam, and Sam proceeded to explain to users what it was like being blind, aiming to raise awareness and spread understanding about some of the barriers people with visual impairments face every day. Care France also chose 7 women living in poverty from different countries to post stories about their life on the Care France Instagram account. The campaign was meant to give followers a glimpse into the women's lives and how they could help. MenCap also gave their Twitter account to Dennis, their pony volunteer, and asked followers to ask whatever questions they wanted. And unsurprisingly, there were a lot. There are also many other charities using content takeovers. They're an easy and effective way to immediately draw attention to some of the issues that users are facing. Demonstrate your impact while keeping an emphasis on local, authentic, and engaging, community-driven content as well. Oh, I've done it again. I've clicked on the wrong thing. Sorry. Skip the next slide. Just catch up with myself. Sorry. And here we are. So how can we connect storytelling and fundraising? Remember, whether presenting user-generated content stories or your own stories, that the goal is to demonstrate your impact, raise awareness and ultimately raise funds. One of the biggest mistakes that charities make is to create brilliant content, but then neglect the user journey, make it difficult for potential donors to become actual donors. To effectively fundraise, we as charities need to give potential donors the best opportunity that we possibly can to convert into donors. And that means providing lots of options, ensuring there's no digital exclusion and making the process fast, simple and easy as well. The choice of fundraising option will depend, partly on the medium of the story and partly on the nature of the donation as well. But charities should rely on the following things, but more include in this as well. Donate buttons, text to donate, online fundraising platforms, and social media fundraising options. The above basically covers any content you want to publish. You can also direct your audience to donate during the story, with links placed in articles at the bottom of videos, or even mentioned in your webinar or podcast for that matter. Always ensure there's a strong call to action at the end, asking your audience to take the next step once your story finishes. There's so many options for digital fundraising. You simply need to just pick the best one that works for you, for your charity, and do your research to ensure that the user journey is easy. Best example I always give when talking about user journeys, and it's for a totally different type of donation, is for blood.co.uk. Obviously, very type of different donation, but I love the whole journey I go on when I go to give blood. From the minute you get in there, you get the friendliness of the staff. You do what you need to do. You get your cup of tea and a biscuit afterwards, but then that's not it. 10 years ago, you'd get sent out the door, you'd get a letter sometime in the future asking you to come and do it again. Now it's totally different. They have a different use for text to donate, in that sense, where you get that next text saying, oh, your blood has gone to such and such hospital and will help XYZ, and that always fills me full of warmth. But they've shown me that story. Like my donation's gone on a different story, like God has created its own story, and this is what it is. And that invokes me to give more. I know it sounds weird in the sense it's a totally different donation, but it crosses over into our world as well. It's like you invoke that same emotional connection, that feeling that I've helped someone, but I know where it is, and I know a little bit about who it is, know where it is. I know that it's gone on to make a difference. And I think a lot of charities can take a lot from that in terms of that journey that I'm sent on. The next time they send a letter or they give me a call to ask me to come again, I always remember that text message and go back to, oh yeah, I should do that again, because it was really helpful. It was really authentic. And that's it. Now you all have, now you have all you need to be sort of a fundraising storyteller. You've thought of your story, you've considered the emotional connection, you've ran through the basics of storytelling, created the story with the users in mind, you've picked the best medium, and ensured that the fundraising option at the end of the call to action was easy to use and quick. And using those simple steps, you really can create brilliant stories that drive forward your campaigns, demonstrate your impact, and ultimately raise more funds for you. And that's all from me today. Thanks very much for listening. Quick note that with Charity Digital, we've got loads more information on creating great content for fundraise, including videos, podcasts, webinars, events, and of course the written word. We also have our conference coming up in 6 weeks' time. We're going to have a session on digital fundraising, and storytelling there as well as lots of other stuff on fundraising, including data for fundraising, and a few other stories from charities. So if you haven't bought a ticket to that yet, go and check it out. But I'll answer some questions first.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Chris. That was such a powerful quote from Hemingway, wasn't it?
It is.
Very sure, and immediately tugged at my heartstrings. Yeah, this has been so informative and really, really valuable. Thank you for that. Yeah, let's pop to the questions. So for those that do want to ask questions, do it now. We have a question that says about interested in using stories in grant application forms. Will you be covering this?
Oh, interesting.
Well, it is a good one, yeah.
I can't see grant applications. That's something I've got a great deal of experience with, if I'm being totally honest with Jocelyn. But if they allow space for it, I can't see how it would harm. I know some of these application forms have quite strict sort of processes and procedures, but being a marketer, I'll never turn down an opportunity to embellish or show stories where I can. So my answer would be, yeah, absolutely. Showcasing the work you've done to potential grant givers it seems to me is paramount to be able to cement the grant that you.
Oh, I think you've just glitched a tiny bit, Chris, but you will probably be back. And we do, yeah, Chris is just coming back with us now.
Sorry about that.
You're back, that's absolutely fine.
Sorry about that, Jocelyn. I was mid question answer. This happened to me this morning, and I did everything I could to stop it from happening this time around. I'm glad it's happened not mid presentation, although I'm sorry it happened during your question. Yeah, I would take the opportunity to do it if the grant application allows for it. Showcasing the impact you're having can only help your application, essentially.
Okay, brilliant. This bee is asking, how do I effectively tell a story about the charity's journey and progress without making it too much about numbers?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, how do I effectively tell a story about the charity's journey and progress without making it too much about numbers?
Involve people. Yeah, the best way to do that is focus on the characters that are involved in your stories we're talking about throughout this. I think you can get distracted by data and numbers, which is powerful, but it's all about the people, really. That's what helps breed authenticity when it comes to storytelling. Using authentic people, being able to relate to the people in the story as well, that drives that emotional connection. The data and numbers are often a good way to do that. They're a good form of showcasing impact, but it's almost harder. That's something I'd use more if I was talking to the board, perhaps, or grant funders, to use the last application. But if I was trying to talk to the general public as donors, what you want them to see is the impact that their figures can have on the end user.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, I don't think they'll give to the 10,000. We've helped 10,000 people. They'll give to that one thing, character, plot that'll resonate with them the most.
Sure. And I don't know whether you've had just a chance to look at the chat, because Nikki has said that they tend to showcase their work through trust applications, through quotes, family feedback, images, podcasts, and video clips.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
So yeah, then Jocelyn has said that some just do ask for a certain format, and I guess it's the structure. So I guess it depends on who you're applying for, doesn't it, and the format that they're asking for there.
I would take it wherever you can, Jocelyn. Take creative license. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
That's a good one. I remember that one. Isabel is asking, how do you balance the need to create empathy and passion for prospective donors without relying on showing your beneficiaries in vulnerable positions, maintaining dignity, positive, they've got to be positive for them. That's a really good one, isn't it? It's talking about safeguarding as well, I guess, especially for young children. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, Isabel, because it's a really important point, actually, and something we didn't cover throughout the webinar, but it is all about it's finding balance, essentially. In the best way we've advised people to do this before is don't go in with a brief to your beneficiaries. I'd say work with your beneficiaries to really understand what makes them, what will maintain dignity for them and what will keep them safe. You know, if it's with children, talk to the parents. It's like anything when we're learning, we're learning about these different types and different backgrounds. We need to talk. We need to involve them in the process. So it's something that I would, from an advice point of view, would do together. Work with your service users to create content ultimately that will benefit them in the long run, and have them be a part of it and a voice in it, not just an actor.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. James is asking, when fundraising, what advice would you give to remain as authentic as possible, but not too overly formal?
It all depends, I guess, James. I'm sorry, it kind of depends on your charity and what the story you're trying to tell. Authenticity comes with people. Again, people relate to people. It's kind of similar answer to what I was given before. Use people where possible. Talk about us and we. Over numbers and data, be as relatable as possible. It's all about understanding your audience, I think, more than anything else, James, and understand what drives donors to donate and how you can I've got exploit stuck in my head, but it's not exploit. How you can sort of engage with that medium more, like how you can get more out of them by understanding why they donate, and what are the authentic notions within that process, within the journey that you've set up with them, that creates that connection that then encourages them to donate a little bit more. Yeah. That merged with people and understanding your mission and understanding what that donation does, what happens to it from the minute it leaves their bank account or pocket, yeah, to the end goal, to the time it helps that service user. Yeah. That's authentic. You can, the way you set up that message, the way you talk, the tone, that all comes from understanding that audience, yeah, a little bit more, that donor. And you've got to match and find that balance.
And we've just got a comment in the chat from Joe. I guess that sort of, it ties in with the authenticity and also with the safeguarding. And he says about, to protect vulnerable citizens, do you think it'd be better to give them a false name, say Mrs. A?
I think that's a great idea. I think, yeah, it's a great way of safeguarding as well. It'll always never be as authentic, but I like your audience will always understand that. The donors, I think part of the story you're wanting to tell when creating these videos is that these people are vulnerable. This is why. So it's about building that into the narrative as well. But I think that's a great idea, whether it's Mrs. A or something more relatable to your cause. I think that's brilliant. But it helps build the narrative actually of your mission. Like, we are helping these vulnerable people. We can't show them because they're vulnerable. It actually I'll contradict myself, because it actually, in your case, makes it more authentic.
Yeah, indeed. We've got in the chat as well just another quick question from Sophie. Soph, what's the balance you suggest with showing case studies, telling stories and informing infographics, especially on social media?
I couldn't tell you. So from your point of view, the balance, I think it all depends on your audience and how they engage with each of those mediums. Have a look at your data, test. If you've not really done any, like if you're doing all of them, or you've maybe done one or two of the other, throw them all out there, throw them on different mediums, throw them on different channels, see how they perform. That data will tell you then what the balance should be and what you should do more of or less of. I think that's the best way. Twitter analytics, stuff like that is really good. Clicks that have all that sort of stuff. If you've got a social media management platform, even better. The analytics on there are great. But the data that you will get from testing those three mediums will give you a better answer to that question than I ever could.
Great. Lawrence is asking, how did you introduce or start your story?
Oh, good question. I guess I always kind of say being as informed as possibly can, be brave, be bold, and just get going. I think the longer you think about that, the harder it'll be. But to go back to the presentation a little bit, get to know your audience as much as you can. Define the audience. The audience will help you define your content. Then you test the rest. So audience first. Who am I going to create this story for? That'll help you decide, okay, what's the content going to be? What does that audience like to hear about? What do they like to read about? What do they like to watch? Where do they like to watch it? That sort of thing. That'll help you define the narrative a little bit more. Okay, what's the content? That'll help you start on that. You might have a few ideas. It's always, I talk about being data driven. That's really important. But when starting out, don't be afraid to make assumptions. You've kind of got to, right? You know your mission, you know your charity. You've got to write, okay, well, this is what I want to do. Get it out there, test, learn, change. Get it out there, test, learn. And that'll be a repetitive process for the longevity of your charity's existence.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. We've got a question from Anne-Marie, and it sort of ties into what we've been talking about as well. They work with domestic abuse victims, and to be anonymous is really key. So how do you suggest that they illustrate a story when they can't use images of the people or pets who use their service?
It doesn't necessarily work for pets, but you've got the spoken word and articles as well. Obviously, if you can't use images, which have separate powerful meaning to them, podcasts, webinars, or you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to be. Podcasts, webinars, great way to sort of engage people. And it is one of the suggestions throughout the webinar as well. Create articles with audio on top of them as well. You can invite those guests who can speak then, or they'll be behind either off camera or, no images whatsoever. I mean, we work with the National Cyber Security Centre. I know this is totally different, by the way. So it's relatable, and none of them can be on camera. And we can't use images of them. We can't help our audience relate to the speaker. But the message and stuff is so important. We know people will still relate to it if we get the content right. It's again one of those things, like, as long as you focus on what's being talked about, find a medium that you can push that out. You're obviously tied there, Marie, with certain things. There are ways and means to kind of go about that. Great thing about audio content as well for social and stuff like that, you can create your own video. You could create an animated video. You could create graphics on Canva and stuff like that can actually engage us visually, but the power's still there in the narrative and the story. That's audio. So yeah, that's kind of what comes to mind straight away, but I'll give that a little bit more thought offline, because it's obviously very difficult for pets.
Yeah, it is really difficult, isn't it?
But pet owners and stuff like that, you could get on as well. They can talk about pets. It's the pet lovers. I'm a dog lover. Like me, I'd talk for years about my dog, whether people wanted to listen or not. So it's just exploring other options that you've kind of got at your disposal.
Great. Okay, thank you. We have a question from Abigail. What is your advice for building more emotional connections with your audience when the current climate has left many burnout from calls for support?
Yeah.
Burnt out from calls for support. Yeah.
Both burnout and burnt out.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a really good question. And for me, and it's something we're just about to do, because we've seen attrition like everybody else, I think, out in the charity sector at the minute, because we're all tired. We've all slogged for 2 years, and it has been 2 years lockdown, if I really think about it. We're about to go into a new time. But the key for us is, and what we're about to embark on, talk to your audience. We keep making the assumptions that if like the definition of insanity, we keep doing things over and over again and expect different results. It's great that you've seen the change. Now to do something about it is go and talk to them. All right, what can we do better to help serve you? You don't have to talk to all of them, a subset of them that make up your personas within your organization. Talk to a subset of users or donors and be like, okay, what's some of the challenges that they're facing, how can we engage with you better, what can we be doing better. And it's quite a normal tool from marketing and sort of user needs perspective, donor needs perspective, understand them a little bit more. So something I'd highly recommend, especially that you've seen that, you've seen that attrition in your own audience. You can always continue to make those assumptions, use your data, which will lead you in different directions. But we've had some of the stuff happen to us. Our emails have dropped, but our SEO's gone up, different tactics, horses for courses, all that sort of stuff. So make sure you're keeping an eye on your data, talking to your audience and adapting.
Great, thank you. Karen is asking, so they've got a great video of the impact that the hospice has on children and their families. And they've shared it in the past on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, but where should they point the audience to make a donation? They've added a link to the website, online donation page, and don't want to use text donate anymore.
Interesting one. So I'm trying to hazard a guess of who your audience are. If it's hospices and children and families, probably parents, kind of as we're running through there about millennials, where they spend a lot of their time. You can point people back. If it's video based, add in a QR code at the end, for example, which will link straight to your donation page. If it's on Facebook, see if the video will integrate directly into Facebook Donate. Instagram should do the same as well. I don't think Twitter has anything like that yet, but Johan, our content editor, might give me a kick afterwards and tell me I'm wrong. But yeah, see if you can integrate it with the donation platforms that already exist, or the donate buttons that are there. I think you can set it up on Facebook, so they should be able to just, if you set it up as an ad or a boost or something, you should be able to have a donate button straight there, which goes straight through to donate through Facebook. Text to donate would work if you're getting it wider. I guess you could have just a text, great call to action at the end. If not, QR code's great.
Okay, great, thank you. We've got a couple of questions from Anonymous. Number one is, which works best? A story which shows the problem but doesn't show the ending, that is for the donor to create by donating, or a story which shows the problem and how the charity reached a happy ending? Maybe both, right?
I'm just going to read that again.
Yeah. So which works best? A story which shows the problem but doesn't show the ending, that's for the donor to create their own ending by donating, or a story which shows the problem and how the charity reached a happy ending?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with your answer, Liz, because I think it's both, and it depends on the type of donor, I guess. And it depends on, that's about understanding your donor base a little bit more and what drives them, what motivates them. Because that kind of reflects back to the blood story. I got a happy ending in the sense that I knew what was happening. That encouraged me to donate again. But maybe, when a donor's lapsed, for example, I think that's when the first one could come in handy. Okay, you've been a part of this solution before, you're not anymore. Go make your. I like the idea. You've got us all buzzed about make your own ending.
Yeah. I really like that. I do. Yeah, it's great.
So that's probably how you split them up. I think they're two different stories for two different times.
Yeah, and also from Anonymous as well. And the second question is, we always thank donors straight after they donate. But if they've donated to an appeal, we also like to create a journey to update them on the donations for the appeal that was used. How many months after the donation should this be sent? And at what stage can you include other ways they can support the charity?
Yeah, without sounding like a broken record, that's where test and evaluate comes in. We don't have the magic number that says you've got to do it after this amount of time. That's going to be different for every charity, depending on their donor base and how they interact with various campaigns. So test different points. You might want to set it to a month for a month and see what happens, or for a few months, see what happens. If you can A/B test that, even better. If you can put half your audience or a third of your audience on one journey, a third on the other, and a third on the other, see which is the most popular, and you'll have your answer there. I'm just trying to, what's the second half part of the question? How many months have they, and at what stage can you include other ways they can support the charity?
Yeah.
Again, it's a testing thing, and I'm sorry, I can't give you more than that. But as I said before, you'll get a better answer to that question by testing and A/B testing various parts of the journey with your audience live than I could ever potentially give you. You'll have a good sense from your donors and probably from some previous data how often people have donated within that journey. So double down on that, see how that goes, see, the different types of influences or, the exit and re-entry journeys work as well. What can nudge them to sort of re-engage as well throughout that journey. I think it's just testing different touch points. And then you'll find one that works, and then it'll break again very quickly afterwards, because we as like donors change all the time, so it's almost continuously testing and continuously understanding it. But that'll give you a much better answer, like I said, than I ever could.
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions from Visby, and the first one is, how do we include the voices of beneficiaries whose communication is limited, i.e. those with severe dementia and special education needs? What a great question.
Yeah, you might have stumped us on that one.
Would that be part of the carers, I guess, on those?
Yeah, I was just thinking that carers or the family, it goes back to the character. Who's the character in your story, and how can you give that character, if the character is someone who doesn't have who has limited communication, how can you give that character a voice? Is it through the care that they're given? Is it through the family members that support them? Is it through something else that you can provide them with? But again, to go back to what I was saying in an earlier question about working with people in vulnerable situations, do it with them, and do it with their family if they don't have if they have limited communication, and that'll give you a really good sense. But I understand the challenges.
Sure.
But yeah, there was a great
Nick, actually, Nick has just said in the chat, Chris, this could be through image cards, display on whiteboard, and yes, through carers.
Yeah, brilliant. Exactly. One of the things we actually did in Antarctica was have just a placard with one word on that described how we were going to carry forward our care for the planet, essentially. And having 100 placards, as Nick just said, of 100 words, made a really powerful campaign, donation campaign when we came back. But yeah, it was really powerful, and again, as Nick said, can be really powerful in this case.
Yeah, that's definitely could be very, very powerful. We've got another question in the chat from Soph. Any suggestions on how to get to know your donors better?
Ask them. And I say that, I mean, yeah, I laughed at the end of it, but it's the best way. If you're not collecting enough data, we should all try and collect some data when we donate through online. Obviously harder if we're not doing any digital donations, but if you have a database of donors, run a survey. Ask them for more data. Something we do quite regularly. We survey our audience, we ask them for more data. Ultimately it will help you provide a better donation service to them in the future. Understand their motivations. All you're doing there is it's an easy sell to the donors, because you're trying to make what you offer as a service better. So those core donors within your group, those ones who donate regularly all the time, I'm on about, we'll be so willing to help you. That'll be so easy. They can often spread the message for you, help you become ambassadors. But yeah, decide what, is from a data collection point, define what you need to help you make those decisions. And then create either surveys or create interviews, are often a really good way to do it. You might want to interview 10 of them, and get really good sense of what they're of what you need from them.
Okay, we've just got a couple of minutes left, and we've got a couple of questions as well, so we're going to whiz through these. Georgina in the chat says, on the back of the question about people without their own voice, their beneficiaries are songbirds. It's difficult to get stories direct from them. They don't even know that they're helping them, of course. We do our best to get stories from people and love them. We also try to tell stories about species that our research learns. Any other ideas?
Just digesting that one again.
Yeah, so it's about songbirds. Obviously, we can't get the stories from the birds directly. It would be well, we could, or you could play they're beautiful songs. But are there any other?
It's a good idea.
They do stories about the species, but any other ideas that could do their best to get stories from the people that love them? You've really put you on the spot with this one, Chris. I know that dogs is your speciality.
Not too familiar with songbirds, but yeah, that must be difficult trying to get the stories from people who love them. I guess this one has stumped us a little bit, I think. But yeah, I'm gonna have to think about that a little bit more to come up with some ideas. But yeah, I mean, I like Liz's idea actually of getting songs from them, and almost releasing an album of songbird songs that could help. It's different, it's new.
It is. Yeah.
Getting those people who do love them, if they're few and far between, to be ambassadors, for example. How can they spread word in the community or other communities? Is there a lot of songbird communities that exist online, physical, that you can get into and come together to maybe create, I don't know, meetups and stuff like that around them? But I am clutching at straws a little bit there.
Well, Georgina says that it stumps her too. So they use bird songs, and they also use video birds. So maybe we'll have a think about that. Ourselves. Now, the last question, very, very, very last question, because we're finishing. Okay, we work with a range of beneficiaries, including prisoners, vulnerable older people, young carers, disabled children, and more. How do we use one beneficiary story to highlight our impact without confusing people that this is the only beneficiary group we work with?
I'm just reading it again.
Yeah.
So you got to think in there, because that makes me think, do you have different donors for each subsection? Which in that case would require a different story for each subsection, or do you? It begs more questions than answers, I think, because it makes me think of how you promote and market your services, essentially, and how you get donors to engage with it. I think that'll always be difficult if you're creating a story about one beneficiary and then promoting it to all donors. That might be quite confusing. I think if you were to look at it, from our perspective, if we were we create content on fundraising, marketing, cybersecurity, and a whole host of it, but we don't send our cybersecurity content to those that aren't interested in cybersecurity. So I think it's maybe honing the marketing process a little bit, if that's the question you're answering, and only submitting relevant content to the relevant donor audiences that are donating to that beneficiary, and growing that beneficiary, that donor audience, is by working with it, like looking at the data of that donor and create a persona of it, and then using the tactics that come out with that persona to grow further. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. We've had so many questions. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, we've got to wrap up. We're out of time. Like Chris said, don't forget that we've got our Be More Digital Conference on the 30th of June. Not too late to sign up for that.
See you there.
Yeah, our first physical event since the start of COVID, and we really want to see you there. It'd be great. So thank you, Chris. Massive, massive, massive thank you. It's been so enjoyable and so inspiring, really. And I'm sure our audience, I can see from all the chats, from all the thanks in the chats, that they've enjoyed it such a lot too. Thank you for joining us, our audience. We will see you again soon. If not physically, don't forget the conference. Then we'll see you virtually. So it's a goodbye from now.